Well, all right. How's everybody doing today on this Wednesday afternoon? We're going to be starting shortly with Miss Lori Hughes. And I'd just like to say hello, everyone.
All right, thanks, Rich. Hi, my name is Lori Hughes, and with me today I have Mr. Richard Brown, Joseph Watkins, and Ms. Melinda Zinda. I think she's in there today, so we'll see. Anyway, welcome to episode 4 of the Fiduciary Forum, which is held every first and third Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and we have short topics that we go over, just a little bit of learning, and then hopefully some discussion, give you an opportunity to ask questions, and go ahead and make sure to share the forum information with your friends. Hi, Melinda, I see you're there. Today's topic or episode, we're going to be reviewing non-IT goods. And before we get started, we're going to just do a quick, actually, before I do this, let me go ahead and ask, go ahead and let's practice using the little hand up person at the bottom of the room. And if you can go and raise your hands real quick, just super quick. We have what, 75 people? I need at least 73 hands up just to make sure, because we might be asking questions and it's a great way for us to communicate with you in a very large environment. So it's a little person down there at the bottom. Put your hand up. Yeah, thumbs are good, but with 76 people, we get a lot of thumbs and it kind of makes a lot of noise and a lot of extra chatter there. So if you can find that hand up button, that would be preferred. So go ahead and click on that. Should be EKS down at the bottom there. And if you don't see it, that's okay. You found it. All right. So go ahead and click on it again to put your hands back down. This kind of reminds me of, my kids when they were in school, everyone raised their hand if they have a question. We will have a Q&A, as you can see from the agenda right here. And if you have any questions that come up regarding the topic as far as the classification for non-IT goods, we will have an opportunity at the end of the brief presentation. It's very, very short because it's meant to be kind of a more informal way of communicating versus a class. So you don't get a certificate for attending. If you want your manager to know you were here, just tell your managers you were here, send them an email, but no certificates involved. Let's see. So today we're going to be talking about non-IT goods. Before we can do that, we need to talk a little bit about why correct classification matters in the first place. I'll briefly, and I mean briefly, review classification types, and then Rich will come on, talk about non-IT goods, and then we'll have some Q&A. We want to make it a little interactive, but at the same time with a lot of people, it can kind of get crazy. So let's go ahead and get started about why it matters. And I was going to say something, and if someone can let Interpreet know that there's a way that person can call in by using the 3 lines, that'd be great. So instead of me telling you why it matters, I think I'm going to turn this around a little bit, make it more informal. From your experience, for those of you who have actually procured goods or services, why is it important to select the correct classification type? So go ahead and put that down in the room chat if you have an answer. Let's see if you get all my answers. So why is it so critical? Why is it such a big deal? Okay, right. It's going to determine what policies and procedures you use. You pick the wrong one, you could be following the incorrect law, you could be following the incorrect policy and procedure. It changes the documentation requirements. Yeah. So what documents do you put in? Do you have to make a solicitation, or depending on the dollar amount, can you procure in a different way? Let's see what else you have. Purchasing authority. If you're familiar with the purchasing authority approval letter, or we just had a discussion about this earlier. Some people might call it the purchasing authority letter. We're actually going to have a forum on the letter itself. But if you look at the letter that you have, it says how much you can spend for each classification type, for each approach and method to move forward with the procurement. If you classify incorrectly, you might end up with an illegal contract because maybe your department can only spend so much money on non-IT goods or on IT. or in services. So if you're not careful and you select the incorrect classification type, then you could end up with that illegal contract. Uh, let's see. I want to go through and see what. If you're not sure about the dollar amount, you kind of should be. There are cases with some very, very large, complex deals where we might have to do something called the request for information, try to get more into cost, but we should have at least a general idea as to what we're looking for in the budget. Let's see. So has approval, specific rules. So you covered purchasing authority. You got what documents you may need to use. So for example, for goods versus services, you'll need to include the SABRAC form, right? That's the recycled content form. So you need to correctly classify, is it goods? Is it services? Is it IT? Or is it non-IT? So critical. Also, depending on if it's classified, for example, if it's classified as IT and it's over a certain dollar amount, you might need to go to the California Department of Technology, that's CDT, and get approvals before you can move forward. If you're not familiar with that, we'll be talking about the IT classification. I think it's in 2 forums, and as well as if you go to the State Contracting Manual, SCM Volume 2, you can learn more about the requirement for California Department of Technology approvals. Speaking of approvals, depending on the dollar amount and the classification type, it could vary what level of approval you need or whether you need approvals or how you go about doing that. And then as someone said, for the negative side, let's flip it around a little bit using the room chat. What is the downside if you use an incorrect classification type? We kind of talked about it with the good. What's the bad if you pick the wrong classification type? And Katera, you already said something there, right? So Katera said, if you don't, you could, worst case, lose purchasing authority. And they take that, they don't take it lightly when a department loses purchasing authority. And purchasing authority is where DGS gives your department the opportunity to procure on their own. If your department loses purchasing authority, or because you misclassify and you're using the wrong rules, laws, not including the correct legal documents depending on the classification type, you might not lose authority, but it might get decreased, which means more having to go to DGS to have those purchases made for you. And you don't want that to happen. We've had people in the class for that. Kind of ties into the audits, right? If you're using an incorrect classification type, I'm an auditor, pull a file, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to see, okay, are the proper signatures there? Did they classify it correctly? Because remember, you classify correctly, it tells you if it's good, you go this way, it's a service, you go this way. If from the good, if it's a non-IT good, you go this way. If it's an IT good, you go another way, right? The rules, regulations, and laws vary depending on that classification type. So it's critical that you understand the classification types and know where to go if you are having a difficult time doing that. Jamie says we do work, right? So what if you get a request, you've classified it as hardware, it turns out, or as non-IT good, and turns out it's IT. So you kind of move forward with one set of rules, one set of regulations, one set of law, and it turns out you got the wrong thing. You got to back it all out and then go back up the other way if that's discovered later. Money comes out of the wrong fund. Big deal. This happens, I don't want to say people do it on purpose, but sometimes they do. Departments have buckets of money, right? So they might have a bucket of money for IT. They might have a bucket of money for non-IT, right? And someone looks at it and they say, well, wait a minute. We don't have enough money in the IT bucket. So we're going to classify it as non-IT because we've got money there. We'll just kind of like you might do at home with your budget. Can't do that here. If you got a budget set for IT and then goods, you can't just call it goods because you got more money in that column. You can't do that, right? That would go against the whole point of having these budgets. What if it's a mixture of goods and services? We'll kind of talk about that a little later. And then when we get to non-IT services and IT, because there are times when you procure, you have a procurement that you're in charge of, and it's a little bit of a mix of the two, and we'll talk about that later. Let's see, CDT oversight, just looking at some of those. You could get an audit finding, and that's where the auditors come in. Some of you might actually be coming to our classes because of either a failed audit, or you've been given, I always forget what the term is, where you didn't do as well in the audit as they would have liked you to. So they're saying you have to go to specific classes. I guess it's a finding. Anyway, you don't want those dings. It could also lead to an illegal contract. So let's say you didn't notice it. You classified it as non-IT, and it turns out it's IT, which means you went the wrong direction, you followed the wrong rules. In the end, you create a contract, and then somebody somewhere, whether it be a competitor, an auditor, or someone in your department says, wait a minute, this was coded as non-IT. The money is looking to be coming out of the non-IT bucket. You followed the non-IT rules, but you didn't follow the IT rules. And that might include different forms that you need to include. Um, it might include other policies that you need to abide by in regards to going to the California Department of Technology for approvals to move forward. So it's critical. You could end up with that illegal contract, and guess what happens? You have to cancel the current one, or you may have to, and start all over from scratch. So in the end, it also wastes time. Worst case, loss of purchasing authority. And I can tell you, we get calls from people saying we lost our purchasing authority. Anybody know what the dollar amount is that your department can purchase on their own if they lose authority? Anybody know? $100. What can you can't even buy a tank of gas for $100. So you don't want to be in the situation where you're misclassifying and end up where you're at the very end where your department loses authority. Now, if one person does it one time, it might just be focused on you saying, okay, it looks like you might need to repeat the BAC, go to the forums, study the SEM. But critical, because you don't want the last case where you lose purchasing authority, not a good thing. You don't even want to have your purchasing authority reduced, because otherwise that means more times you have to go to DGS to have us do it for you. Takes more time, takes more approvals. All right, so just a little bit about the why. As far as classification types, there are really six, but we only talk about four. So the six are, and I'll ask one of my coworkers here to help me out, non-IT services, non-IT goods, IT, which includes IT goods and IT services, and then the two we don't cover typically with CalPCA, which is public works and architecture and engineering. And that's because the rules and the policies and the steps to do that are so much more complex and specialized that we don't cover them in our training. Today, we're going to be talking about the classification type called non-IT goods. So we talked about why it's important, why it's good that you select the correct one, and what are some of the consequences if you don't pick the right classification type. Told you there's six classification types. Today, Richard's going to talk about non-IT goods, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Richard. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Lori. And we're gonna today is basically we're just gonna be talking about the non-IT goods. And I know there's a lot of people that's in this uh, we call it our forum today, sort of like a podcast that is very new and really don't know exactly everything that's considered a non-IT good. Now, what is a non-IT good? Okay. Now, a non-IT good is actually it's commodity, it's tangible. And I'll give you some examples. Furniture. Furniture is a non-IT good. Furniture like a table or chair. Um, I can give you even a computer stand. You see what I said? A computer stand. The stand itself is a non-IT good. Okay, office supplies. And you have thousands of different items that you buy from, that's in office supplies, food. I didn't even think about this, but Melinda reminded food. We purchase food for the prisons sometimes, tools, all different types of tools, from a hammer to a wrench, press plates, binders, paint. Paint is tangible. Cleaning supplies, those are non-IT goods. Carpets. You can buy carpet. We see DGS. We purchased carpet for a lot of the buildings. The carpet itself is a non-IT good, but the service. I'm not. We're not talking about service, but to put the carpet in will actually would be a service. But floors, ink. I used to specialize in purchasing ink for the Office of State Publishing. That is a non-IT good. Okay. Rolls of paper, that's non-IT goods. Machine parts. And there are also items that may have you wondering if it's a good or does it move into the technology, technology category. And we was talking about this earlier. A flash drive. A flash drive. I told Melinda I was going to talk about this. Now, flash drive is an item that you can put in your pocket. It's an item that you see laying around. But a flash drive itself is actually is an IT item because you got to put it inside the computer for it to work. Now, there are many, and you must determine whether a contract is for IT or non-IT. The buyer must consider the predominant purpose or value of the purchase, whether it's IT, if it's an item that. Let me give you an example. This is an example. Now, you can have a keyboard, a computer keyboard, and I keep using Melinda example because she brought this to my attention. Uh, you can buy 10 keyboards and use them for a plant holder. You can use a keyboard if that's why you bought it, to use it just as a decoration. But if you actually purchase the keyboard just to, for backup for a keyboard that you got from your IT department, it becomes a IT item. And so, and also there are items that you may have purchased years ago. I gave an example of when I worked for the Office of State Publishing years ago, and I bought, well, one of the machines had went down, and the machine that they had been using for at least 30 years, old school. It was a machine that actually cut and made tools. It was a tool cutter machine. And back in the day, it didn't hook up to anything. It was just one of the machines where you just use a handle and you would do the measurements and everything, and you were able to cut the material to make the part. But when they needed to buy a new machine, it was really different because the day and time machines now come with a computer monitor, comes with a monitor and then have different technology things that you can put numbers into the computer on the machine and it will automatically cut the tool. So something that was years ago that was actually a non-IT good, a non-IT machine, ended up being had to go into the IT category because it was actually now the technology is what made it the become the IT equipment. Okay, and so when you purchasing, it's the buyers that's out there right now that's new. Just remember a non-IT item, a non-IT good is tangible. You can put it in your hands. You can move it. You can pick it up. And if any of my colleagues want to have anything to chime in about, I will welcome them. But yes, IT, non-IT goods and services or goods is what we're talking about today. And so if we have any questions, now Melinda or Lori, can you hop on for a second if you want to chime in on anything?
Sure. So when you get that, here's the thing. In some departments, you actually have someone who's handing you a request and they're telling you, right? This is a non-IT good. This is a non-IT service. This is IT good or service. But that doesn't absolve you as a buyer, as someone who's doing an approval from not understanding the exact definition of the various types of classifications, right? Non-IT services, non-IT goods, and IT goods and IT services. Those are the ones we cover here. And so what Rich is talking about, things change, right? That cutter that he was talking about was 40 years old. So back in the day, if you wanted to cut a tool, this was a mechanical machine, right? It wasn't plugging into a computer. It wasn't all done digitally and all that. It was very manual process. Someone actually had to sit there and dial the little things to cut a tool, and it was very manual. 40 years later, it became an IT good because it's a tangible item, right? It's the cutter, but because of the way it interacted, it required the technology. It was really the technology driving the primary purpose of what you're looking to buy. And that's something that you want to consider when you're looking at buying a tool. We were talking earlier today also about keys, a key for a door, not the card key, but a little turnkey. Your department might have a whole set of blank keys. Those are goods, right? They're a tangible item. But when you go to have those key cut, that would be a non-IT service, right? It would be a non-IT good. It's not technological. And here's the thing, it used to be that you would call it IT if it connected to the internet, right? If it connected to the internet, it was IT. Our manager just bought a water heater. I think it was about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And the water heater had a USB drive, so it could be connected to the internet. The refrigerator, you know how the refrigerators have the TVs and all that technology? They can be connected to the internet. But what's the primary purpose of that refrigerator? If it's to keep things cold, that's not an IT-ish type of a thing, makes it a non-IT good. Okay. The water heater, the fact that it has a USB in it doesn't make it automatically IT, right? What's the primary purpose of the water heater? To heat water. So therefore, that would be a non-IT good. Now, one of the things we were already talking about too is something called the DMCP, which is the Desktop Mobile Computing Policy. Raise your hand if you know anything about that, just real quick. Desktop Mobile Computing Policy. All right. It's basically a document where it's already been predetermined for commonly purchased items by your department that are already pre-classified, right? The argument has already been had, right? It could be, Rich mentioned the keyboards. Some people might see that as being IT versus non, and it's obviously a good because it's tangible. And then the decision was made, you go to your DMC document, you have to ask where it is and say, okay, keyboards, are they IT or non-IT? Because those arguments have already happened. Melinda, I saw you had your hand up. Did you want to add something there?
You might be on mute.
Okay, someone says LexisNexis. I don't know what that is. LexisNexis, can someone explain a little bit about what that is? Is that a book or? Oh, okay. We're going to be talking about that, not in this. So we use it. Okay, we talk about a book, right? I'm going to open my thing because then you can see me a little bit. So let's say I want to buy a book, right? I don't have a book in front of me, but pretend this is a book. If I'm
Can you
buying
hear
a
me now?
book, yeah. If I'm buying a book, is this a good?
Yes.
Yes. If I'm buying this book, is it non-IT? Yes. Where it gets a little convoluted or crazy is what if I don't buy this book this way, but I buy it online, right? Because you can read books online. I'm going to turn it over to Melinda to talk about that.
Okay, real quick. So yes, Lori's on the right track, right? Of course, a book that you buy is a tangible commodity. If it's in your hand, you can take it with you. That's a good. You have to know the difference of whether you're buying a book or you're buying a manual or if you're subscribing to a publication. Subscriptions are non-IT services. Subscriptions are non-IT services. Now, what the dilemma is when it comes to that is it IT or not? If you get your publication online, that doesn't automatically make it an IT service. Subscriptions are non-IT services. Um, there's also, let's see, if someone was buying a drug test kit, right? You have to start at the very beginning when you get that initial requisition and you have to ask, you have to think outside the box. What is our intended purpose of this purchase, right? Because that's how you determine your classification, your classification type. So if you need just the drug kits because you're going to take specimens and your own laboratory or scientists are going to, do the results of those tests, then that is a good. You're buying a drug test kit. But are you really needing the service of getting the answer, negative or positive, from a drug test kit? Then in that case, this may be a service is more prominent in this contract than the actual drug kits. Yes, we need drug kits to test people, but at the end of the day, the predominant factor of your purchase, of your contract, would be the service of getting the results. So it's a lot, right? But knowing the difference between something tangible in your hand, also a subscription, meaning publication, and just because you get it online, meaning you can log onto a website and you can look at updates of a manual, doesn't automatically make it IT. Okay, same thing with training. You can get training online, right? Like what you're doing right now. That doesn't make this an IT service. This is still a non-IT service. It doesn't matter the vehicle in which you're getting your product. Okay, sorry. Any other questions? Put them in the chat.
We're going to be talking about non-IT services next time. So the point is you get a request, whether it's coded for you or not, and they tell you what it is, you still have to think, is it IT? Is it non-IT? Is it a good? Is it a service? Today, we're only focusing on non-IT goods, right? The tangible items. We're not getting into the whole subscriptions at this time. Let's see. So we've talked about DMC and go out there as an action item to see if your department has the DMC. We always called it the DMCP, but some will only call it a DMC. But it's basically per policy, every department's supposed to have that listing of what is already basically pre-approved as IT. So right there, you have to go, okay, I know it's IT if it's on that policy, on that book, but then you have to go, okay, is it good or service? And it's typically goods, or we're talking about goods, things like the flash drive, the calculator, and just really thinking to primary purpose. And remember, our focus right now is just non-IT goods. Melinda.
Exactly.
So yeah, so just to sum up in the chat, when it comes to suppliers, whenever they respond to a bid or solicitation, if there's a solicitation with a bid, they have to comply with the general terms and conditions or the general provisions, right? Because general terms and conditions is for services, general provisions is for goods and IT. They must comply to those legal required clauses in order to hold a contract with the state of California, right? That's our legal documents. So yes, it doesn't matter what you're purchasing. All suppliers must comply to those.
Thank you, Melinda, and thank you, Lori. Well, it is 2:31 p.m. This normally would be a 30 minutes, and I knew it was going to go over a little bit, because we have so much to talk about. That's why we're going to have this far as this topic, the classification in four different. It's going to be four, you guys, or it's going to be three?
Three.
Three, yeah,
This is
three,
part
three
one of
different
three
phases.
parts.
So it's going to be good. So you guys come back in a couple of more weeks. Um, we have more to come at you. So if you have any more questions, go ahead, put them in the chat, and they definitely will be answered. Well, I appreciate you all for coming in. Go ahead, Lori.
I just want to finalize with our outro. Be sure to check SCM Volume 2, Chapter 3, Sections 303 and 304 for more on the classifications and kind of the process for doing that. If you need help with the classification, talk to your lead. You can also go to your PAC or your PCO and then talk to your department engineers. And finally, go to PAMS, which is where the purchasing authority group is. If you send it to PAMS at dgs.ca.gov, they can help you make the final call, because we've seen a lot of reference here in the group chat that there are times where we kind of go back and forth. Is it a good? Is it IT? Is it a service?
Right.
Is it not? You can always go to PAMS and they'll help you out as well. Melinda.
Along those lines, if you are in a pickle trying to figure out a classification, because I'm going to say this again in our next forum, I'm going to go over non-IT services. If you're in a pickle with determining classification, go through your chain of command. Talk to the supervisor, the manager, the branch chief. Go up to the purchasing authority contact, right? Your PACs, your PCOs. You want to classify and justify your contracts. It's your agency's contract first. Now, if there's still an issue and it's still just a gray area, right? You're still debating it. Have your PAC or PCO contact DGS so you can get it in writing, the workout of the determined classification type for you to move forward.
Well, thank everybody. We thank everybody for joining us in this forum today. We'll be doing it every 2 weeks. So we want you guys to invite your coworkers, friends onto our forum, the Fiduciary Forum. Thank you guys.